Gotta get my act together. Okay, so after the Gemara, we are up to Daf Samach Gimel Amud Aleph. But really, let's go back to base on the base because the sugya of Esnan is a whole different sugya. I believe that we got there yesterday, but I want to just quickly review it. So the Gemara was discussing a very interesting case where the Dvei Rabbi they would borrow pairs of shvius from the Aniyim on shvius. On shvius, on the Shemitah year, there's plenty of pairs around. So therefore, there were plenty available pairs. So the Aniyim had extra pairs to lend out. Where the Aniyim had a problem was on the 8th year, they didn't have. So they did it so that on the 8th year, they could pay back the Aniyim with pairs. The problem is, I'm sorry? They were lending to Gvirim who didn't really need, but I guess they used that as a way to be able to give in a Bechavid payers back to the Aniyim on the 8th year. So they were trying to do a good deed over here. And we know that Peiros Shvius is Toifus as Damov. So if you're giving us Peiros Shvius and we're paying you back on the Shminis, well then the Kedusha should be Toifus to Damov on the Shminis. And the question is, are they doing something that's appropriate? Because on the Shminis you're not allowed to have Peiros Shvius anymore. So this question was brought to Rabbi Yochanan, and Rabbi Yochanan said, in fact, they're doing the right thing. It's a good thing that they're doing. And the reason why it's a right thing is because the Peiros Shvius that were lent out are no longer here, and the repayment that I'm giving you is later than the next year. There, it's not Toifus Damov. When do you say that the Isser is Toifus Damov? That's only for doing a swap, a live swap. You're giving me A, and I'm giving you B, so then it's Toifus Damov. But here, since the Peiros Shvius are completely consumed before the repayment is made, there it's not Toifus Damov. So in fact, they're doing a good thing. That's what the Gemara said. And the Gemara wanted to bring a raya. Now, there was another problem over here that Tosfos raises. There's something called saw b'saw. It's also for me to lend you a bushel of apples and that you'll pay me back a bushel of apples later. Why? Because the price changes. So what's happening really is the bushel of apples that I might be lending you might be worth $10. And then when you give it back to me, it might be worth $11 if the price of apples went down. So there's a problem of ribbis to rabbanan of saw b'saw. That's a problem that Tosfos raises. Tosfos has different solutions for the problem. One, parrots, to simplify it, is we didn't give them 10 apples in the Shvius, or the Aniyim didn't give them 10 apples on the Shvius and take back 10 apples on the Shvius. The Aniyim gave them $10 worth of apples b'shvius, and they got paid back $10 worth of apples b'shvius, not necessarily the same amount of apples. So it's not a problem of saw b'saw. The Gemara wants to bring a raya that when the swap is not made live, rather, I'm giving you B after A is no longer around, the Gemara wants to bring a raya from Esnam. So let's start from there. The Tanya we learned, Nosan law. What happens if someone gives a woman an animal, but v'loy ba'ala, but never had an interaction with her, or ba'ala v'loy nosan lo esnana, or he was ba'ala and he never gave her an esnan, mutter. So Zaktimar, the price cannot be taken at face value because it doesn't make any sense. Nosan lo v'loy ba'ala. If he gave her a gift of an animal, he never was ba'ala. Pshita, of course. Even the loibala matana ba'almahu di'avla. That's not an esnan. An esnan is an exchange of znus for an animal. Here, the animal was given, no znus happened. So how could this be called an esnan zayna? I don't need a mishnah to tell me that. The second case, ba'ala v'loy nosan. If he was bala and he never gave her, so then what? There is nothing to discuss. There was no esnan given. Why do I need the Brisa to tell me that the esnan is mutter when there's no esnan at all? So this cannot be what the Brisa means. Rather, the Brisa must be referring to a case where the swap didn't happen at the same time. He gave her an esna. The achach bala. It doesn't mean that he was never bala. It means he was bala not at that time, but at a later time. Oy bala, or first he was bala, and at that time he did not give her an esnan. Rather, the achach noslan he gave it to her at a later time, mutter. So that proves our point that the swap doesn't take on the isser if they didn't happen at the same time. That was the right. So now let's get a little into this price of this. Noslan law the achach bala. He first gave her an animal, and maybe the next day he was bala. For Gemara, we know he gave her that esnan because of the scheduled zdus. So therefore, why don't we say l'chibala the next day when he is bala lechol Allah is her esnan? So at that point, it should be an isher esnan because we know, as Rashi says, when he originally gave it to her, it was on behalf of paying for the services. So therefore, lechol Allah is her esnan l'mafreya. So why does the Brisa say it's not chal? Amar Rabbi Lazar kishakadma v'krivasai. He gave her the esnan on Monday. He came for his appointment on Tuesday, but Monday afternoon she gave that as a korban to the Beis Hamikdash, and the animal is no longer in existence at the time of this nus. Let's drill down to get a better picture of exactly what happened. If when he gave her the gift on Monday, he says you can have the gift now. Even before we have our rendezvous, you could have the animal right now. So there, Shita Deshari, for sure it should be mutter, the lesle b'shaspia, because the animal is no longer in existence at the time of the bia. As Rashi says, if he says klime achshav, koidim bia, Shita that will be mutter. The apple gab, the amanas bia yohavan, even though he did give it to her only because of the bia, but kivun de mekamei bia yohavan lav schar biahi. That wouldn't be called schar bia. It was given before. So Zok to Gemara umatana ba'almahu diyavla. It's a regular matana. It's not going to be linked to the bia. V'idal oyamer la k'ni leich mayachshav. And if when he gave her the animal, he didn't say you should be koine it now, meaning you should only be koine it when the trigger occurs, when we have our appointment. Well then, heichi matzi makrava. How could she even have brought it as a korban? It doesn't count as a korban because she can't be makdish anything. It's not hers. It says v'ish ki yakdish is beisay kodesh amar rechmana. Ma beisay b'shusay af kol b'shusay, which is not exactly what we're referring to. It's what the Gemara says as well. Ma beisay shaloi af kol shaloi. You cannot be makdish as a korban somebody else's animal, and if he didn't want her to have it until the appointment, so then kum techais, it was never hers. So it's a possible korban. Ella. The Amr law, he must have told her. Now it's funny because who's the Gemara's thing is she on her own would have known that you can't bring it for a korban, or when she brings it to the kohen asks her, "Did you have your appointment yet?" I'm not sure if we can take it. I'm not sure exactly the practical aspect of how this is screened out. Ella, the Amr law, it must be what the case was. The Amr law. You hold on to it until tomorrow. And really tomorrow is when the kinyan should be chal, meaning when the transaction occurs. However, he stuck in an additional clause. The mistrich, if for some reason you need this animal, the mistrich leich, if you need it, then klime achshav. So by sticking that phrase in, it dislodged the esnan from the appointment, and that's why the Brisa says that it's a mutter. As Rashi says, the mistrich leich klime achshav, hilchach itrich masnisen lashminan. That's why we need a Mishnah to tell me that it's an esnan, because that's a chiddush already. The afagab do amallah. So that would make it into an esnan because the kinyan only happens shashbia, but he's stuck in this extra clause. That disengages it from the transaction. When she took it and gave it in, and therefore it's not considered an esnan. What happens if kadma v'hikti shasamau? We're telling you that the case of the Brisa was when she actually brought it as a korban, so the animal's not even here anymore at the time of the appointment. But what if she was just makdish? She designated it as a korban, but it had not yet been brought and been shechted yet in the Beis Hamikdash. What would the halacha be? Do we say when you merely are marked to something, saying it pepeh, the kinyan is schal as if you had already made a kinyan with somebody else. It's transferred fully into hektish. And therefore, let's say, command that krifte dame, we look at it like it was already hookrav, and therefore it will not have it in of an esnan. Or on the other hand, the mice of the animal sitting right here, and the mice he's giving her the animal because of those, maybe it should be considered an esnan, and it should be possible to be brought as a carbon. Zok Gemara, maybe we could bring a raya from Rabbi Eliezer's words himself, who explained the Mishnah that is speaking where Kadma Vekrivasoi, from there you have proof. Why did he say Kadma Vekrivasoi? He could have said Kadma Viktishtai. The fact he said Vekrivasoi, Dom Rabbi Eliezer Kadma Vekrivasoi, Dafne Krivasoi, Avaluktishasoi Loi. So that's where we have a raya from being Medaik in the words of Rabbi Eliezer. Zok Gemara Loi. The Rabbi Eliezer Gufa come about Maybe Rabbi Eliezer Gufa has a shaila. My mivshat pshita leila Rabbi Eliezer the hakrivasoi davka avalaktishtei loy. Why did Rabbi Eliezer pick krivasoi? Is it because he knew surely that only a krava would redeem this from being an esnan? But had she merely been makdishet, it would not have helped the isha b'shaspia like the tzad of our shaila because it's still around at the time of the bia. Aydilma hakrivasoi pshita lei vekdishasim eshavkalei. Maybe the reason why Rabbi Eliezer chose a krivasai is not because he was sure that a klishasai wouldn't work. It's because he was unsure if it would work, and he wanted to pick something that was a sure bet. And therefore, teku, you don't have a raya from Rabbi Eliezer's selection of a krivasai to resolve the brisa that hekdishasai is for sure going to be an esnan. Hekdishasai might remain a sofek. Ba'aleh, let's analyze the brisa further. Ba'aleh, first he was ba'aleh, and the achakach nasan esnano is mutter, which means he only paid later. If he paid later, then it's not called an esnan. For the Gemara, we have a brisa that contradicts this because it says ba'aleh the achak nasan la afil mikan at shalosh shanim, even if he only paid her 3 years later, esnana aser. So this is a steer in brises. Amar Nachman Yitzchak, Amar B'chisol Kasha, Had Amar Hisboili Bitlezeh. If he told her, you should be developed to me, and I'm going to pay you with this specific tle, there, even if it's Mekan Vachol Shonim, it will be also. But ha the Omer law is bali bitle stam. I'm going to pay you, but he didn't say what he would pay you with. So therefore, the kinyan will not be chal right away, and the iser won't be chal right away. As Rashi says, bitleze kol kama diyoyev lo have est. If he designated which specific animal he's going to give her, then it doesn't matter if he gives it to her right away or not. The mahashta kanise, we say it's niknit to her b'shas bia, even though he didn't actually hand it over to her. That will get the stigma of an esnan. But if he said b'tlastam, so he couldn't have given her anything at the time because nothing at the time was identified. Ki yoyv l'lachazman lav esnanu. Why the hash do the color? She only claimed it later because the animal that she was going to be given was not even clarified or designated at that time. So she surely couldn't have been claimed. But if it was designated, even though he only handed it over to her later, that doesn't matter. No, he can give it to her right before, and he'll tell her, I'm giving it to you. No, he'll tell her, even the day before, I'm giving it to you for the bia. So at the bia, it will be chal. Right? Even if he designated which tle, why would that make a difference? In order for her to be kind of this, she has to make a mashicha. Like Dovi asks, at the time while they're doing it, she's busy with her mashicha, right? That's practically it's not going to work. Zok Gemara, who said that the Zoyna was a Bas Yisrael? The halacha that kesef isn't koina, and you have to make a mashicha on the actual item that you're buying. That's a rule only for Jews. Maybe we're talking about a Zoyna Ivetis Kechavim. Maybe this Zoyna is a goita, and therefore, like koina b'mashicha, she's koina with kesef. Meaning, kesef means when I give you the money that I'm paying for this item, at that point, I'm going to be koina the animal. Well, that's exactly what happens. When she gives him the bia that this animal is paying for, automatically she'll be koina the animal. She doesn't need a mashiach. So that's happening right at the same time. Or you could say, La'olam b'zoyna Yisraelis. Really, we are speaking about a zoyna Yisraelis. And you need Mashiach. So where's the Kenyan? At the time of the Znus, it was in her Chatzar. So there she will be koined right at the Znus. I'm sorry? Right.
Walking exactly.
No. It was there before, but I'm saying I'm being marketed you for the bia. So therefore, it's set up, ready to be koine. If I walk in with my animal to your chatzor, you're not automatically koine. If I want you to be koine, and we're having a transaction, it'll be koine. So I'm saying it should be the transaction should happen when we actually exchange goods or services, right? So Zok to Gemara, frankly, the if it's being in her chatzor, so then Ba'ala, in the case of when he gave it to her later, you also have to say speaking in the parallel cases, but she was already koinit if we designated which animal it was. And it's in the chatzar, so it doesn't matter. What do you mean? It's already there. He says, I don't want you to be koinit. I'm not being maki with the animal. Yes, the animal's right here in your rishos, but I don't want you to be koinit. Because I like to pay you an animal. I'm going to pay you in cash. The Amrullah, he told her, I'm going to pay you within 30 days. If I pay within 30 days, then this is not a nestan at all. I'm giving you cash. But if I let you hold on to my animal as a surety, if I don't pay you within 30 days, then then you'll take it. So therefore, surely the kinyan didn't happen right away because he wasn't giving it to her at all. He was just giving it to her as a surety, and therefore it will not be a nest. Maser Rav Sheshes had a kash. A person could tell his employees who he is responsible to feed them. He could tell them, here's $20, buy yourself lunch. Or go buy yourself a drink with this money. Now the problem is, these people, what are they going to do with the money? How are they going to spend the money? At which vendor will they purchase their food and their drink? We don't need to be concerned that the vendor that these people might patronize, which I am enabling them to because I'm giving them the money, we don't have to worry that they're going to go to a vendor who's actually illegally selling payers shvius. I don't have to worry about that. Because normally it says, if you want to buy payers shvius from an amoritz, he gathered it for you for his services, you can't pay him more than shalosh shudos because you're afraid that he's going to hoard that money and he's not allowed it. So the question is, am I responsible for money that I give my employees to buy food? No, I'm not. Or I don't have to be worried that they're buying meiser that was not mu'usar. We're not worried that they're buying tevel. Because I'm not feeding them tevel. I'm not feeding my employees tevel. I'm giving them money. If they want to buy tevel with it, I'm not responsible for it. No, but the problem is they're not an issue for a guy to eat tevel, but there's the issue to give an amoritz that they might buy from Yosy begilmul sudos. No, the employees are good. But the guy might go and buy from a Yidan Amaretz and give him more than Shalosh Shudos. So now I'm causing him to get money more than Shalosh Shudos, which is not allowed. V'loy mishum yayin nesach, and I don't have to worry about yayin nesach. So v'loy mishum yayin nesach im oivdei kechavim heim, if the oivdei kechavim v'nimta machilim yayin nesach. If my employee is a guy, so he's buying, he'll buy yayin nesach, he'll make it yayin nesach, and now I'm feeding him yayin nesach. I'm relieving my responsibility to feed my employee with Isurei Hana. However, Vim Amar Lahem, Tzu ve'ichlu, you go and eat, Vani Pareh, and I'll pay later, meaning I'm directly dealing with the vendor, and I'm feeding you. It's as if I'm feeding you the food, but I'm paying the vendor directly. Or Tzu, Shesu, Vani Pareh, then Choshish Mishum Shvius, then we do have that concern, because then I'm the one who, as if I'm buying it myself, as if I'm buying all these products and I'm not allowed to feed them. So the shvis, the problem would be is that I'm giving somebody yoshim and wasn't shalosh shudos. I'm not allowed to do that. Mishamaiser, the problem is So that's only going to be referred to if we're dealing with Jewish employees, because a goy has no problem eating meiser, and yain nesach, there's going to be a problem that I'm having enough. I'm yain nesach by feeding it to my employees. But Alma, what do you see from here? That ki kapara demei iser kapara. Here, the exchange doesn't happen at the same time. Right? The whole basis with which we were matter to borrow Peir Shvis and pay back Peir Shminis is the swap doesn't happen at the same time. But here it's not happening at the same time either. The employees are eating, and they might come in the next day and pay. So why should that be a problem? The vendor that I'm sending them to purchase from is a vendor that I have a credit account with. The mishtabedle. There's already an existing established credit relationship, and therefore the transaction looks like this. The kibon de urche lakufe koni le diner gabe. We look at it that since this fellow trusts me, he owes the money that I have already in my pocket that I'm going to pay tomorrow with. He already has a shibud on my money the moment these people take their product. Zok Rashi, the mishabed lehai balabais mishated the yoyv chenveni peri. The moment the chenveni releases the pairs to the employees, it's his money wherever he has it is mishubet at chenveni. V'hava kenoisim miyad liyad. We look at it like he's actually paying with that shibud at the time that they're taking the food. Frank Gemara, I don't understand. What if it's a chenveni who doesn't have an ongoing credit relationship, but they're still doing this transaction where he's going to pay later? My mutter, you're going to say that's going to be mutter. Ihachi, if that's the case, adatani tzu veichlu b'diner zeh, tzu ishasu b'diner zeh, live like velista b'didah. What was the case that was mutter? What was the case that was off? The case that was mutter was if I tell you pay, if I tell you I'm going to pay, you take the food. The case that was mutter is when I gave the cash to my employee and told him to buy. Why did you have to go to such a different case? Keep the two cases more similar. The case of Isser and the case of Heter could have been more similar. Live like the list of B'yidah. When do we say that it's Osir? That's B'chamvani Hamakivai, the Mishtabedle. Avochamvani Shemakivai Mutter. That should have been the distinction. It's in the same case. Both are a case of credit. It's mutter if we don't have an ongoing relationship of credit, and it's Osir if not. Why go to a case of Heter where I gave them the cash? Even if I didn't give them the cash, it would be mutter if it was a chenveni that I don't have a relationship with. V'yoid, chenveni she'em akifoi, miloi mishtabed. I don't understand. What's the difference if I have an ongoing credit relationship or if he's extending me credit for the first time right now? At the end of the day, whatever money I'm going to pay him with is still mishtabed. So they shouldn't make that difference. The Amar Rava said, if I tell my chava, take money laploini, you give money, I tell A, give money to B, and you'll be kind of I'm C. So if you give money to B, you'll be kind of kol nichsoi. It works like an Arav does. Why does it work like an Arav? Because what an Arav is you're lending A money, right? And B has to pay back, right? So you see that the money that creates the shibud doesn't necessarily have to be given to the person who becomes a meshubed. You can lend money to A, and B is meshubed mechuyev to pay you back. So too, as well, kinyonim work that way as well. I can say you pay A, and I, B, will give you something. So that would work the same way over here. So Aibazoi, why Bechlal would it be mutter? Elo Amarava, Loishna Makifoi, Veloishna She'en Makifoi. It doesn't really matter if he has an ongoing credit relationship with this vendor or not. Afal Gav de Meshabedle, even though my money now becomes Meshubed to pay off that debt for this purchase, even the loy miyachid shibus the loy mitzer. Regardless, it wouldn't be usher even if it was done through credit. Kivan the loy miyachid shibudai loy mitzer. So what does miyachid shibuda means? Since we're not specifically identifying something that is going to be meshubed to pay, the fact that I owe you money doesn't make it as if I actually paid you. As Rashi says, Kivan the loy miyachid shibudai shelo yichlo miyad mois lakach. It was not like I have a pile of cash sitting in my house that this is designated to pay you. I'm going to pay you with whatever assets I have. We don't consider it like the vendor made that exchange, and therefore v'lo mitzer, and therefore it will not be us. Zok to Gemara. Giving them liach jibudai limiter. Elahacha amai choishish mishum shviyas. So then, why is there a concern? Why is there a concern if I'm going to pay later? Why is there a concern that it's usher here? It's not happening at the same time, right? There's a disconnect between when I'm taking it, when I'm giving it, and the whole heter that we had to give those aniyim on the shminis pairs in lieu of the shvias was only because they're disconnected. But you see, being disconnected, being at a different time, does not change anything. We see that this vendor, it's usher for him to do that. Zok to Gemara. So Hachamar Papa Kegoin Shehiktim Loy dinner. It's speaking where I paid in advance. So I didn't have credit. I went to the vendor, here's $100. My employees are going to come eat by you. And that means at the time that they took it, there's an instant transaction. That's why it was also in the brayso that we have. Amar Rav Kana. So Rav Kana said, I'm Risa L'Shmaitza Kamedir Rav Zid Min Harda. I said over the shtickle to Rav Zid from Harda, and he told me that doesn't make sense to touch the brayso that way. Because then the wording of the brayso don't make sense. Or that's not what's happening. It's not go eat and I'll pay later. What I should have said is and I'll already make a calculation with the vendor how much money I still owe him, or if it's how much credit I still have. So the wording "go eat and I will pay" is mashma that I had not yet prepaid it. So that wouldn't make sense. I'm like, okay, we'll have to change the nusach of Raisa. Change it. We have to change it, otherwise the Raisa doesn't make sense. Rabashi Amar, another option. I didn't just say, here's money, go buy. No, I went to the store with them. And I gave the money to the vendor, and I took the food from the vendor, and I gave it to the employees. So there, I'm doing the transaction. That's why it would be also. But if there's a delay, there's no problem. It should have said Tluva should take, because I'm the one who's giving it to him. Dr. Gemara, Miboyle is what it should say. I'm like, no problem, we could change that for you. Tani, Tluva Ichlu, Tlu Vishasu. Dr. Gemara weiter. Yosef Rab Nachman v'Ula v'Avimai bar Papi, Rab Nachman, Ula, and Avimai bar Papi, v'Yosef Rab Chia bar Ami Gabai, and Rab Chia bar Ami was sitting by them. The Yosef will become a boilu, and they were sitting and clearing about the following shayla. Sachrei lishbar b'yayin mal. I'm a Jew, and I own barrels that are usher ba'anoah because of yayin esech, and I got to destroy the barrels and destroy the wine. Could I pay someone to destroy the barrels and the wine? What's the problem with me paying? Because you who I'm paying are having enough of yayin esech and from the barrels of yayin esech. Because if it wasn't for these barrels, you wouldn't be getting paid. So, was it go you are a Jew? Okay, Sachrei lishbar b'yayin mal. And we'll have a look at Rashi in a second. As an aside, Tosfos tells us this is a little bit of an unusual scenario, because normally when the Gemara tells a story about the Yosef Rav Nachman, V'Ula Avimai, Yosef Rab Chia bar Abba Gabayu, if the Gemara is telling us that Rab Chia bar Ami was sitting there, usually the story will be about a discussion about Rab Chia bar Ami saying something to them and them responding. Yet the conversation that the Gemara continues with has nothing to do with Reb Bar Ami. He wasn't asking, wasn't answering. He was just an onlooker. So it wouldn't have even been necessary to mention that Reb Bar Ami was Yosef Gabayu. That would have only been relevant normally in the Gemara when it's Reb Bar Ami who was saying something. So that's what Tosfos points out. So Tosfos says there's actually more to this story than the Gemara is sharing. So let's take a quick look at Tosfos. Tosfos says Yosef Reb Bar Ami Gabayu. Rabbeinu Tam hayu medaktik. Rabbeinu Tam was medaktik. Shebechol mokoin shehu oimer v'Yosef ploni gabayu maskira kain lefi shehu hayr him davar chiddush. The reason why it says v'Yosef somebody gabayu is that guest was going to be telling them something that the Gemara was going to have a discussion about. Over here, Reb Chia bar Abba literally is a filler in. He has nothing to do with the story. V'chan loy diber Reb Chia bar Abba kamai. We didn't speak anything to them. So Zok Tosfos, let me tell you, there's more to the story. This story happened at the same time as a story that's recorded in the Gemara in Ksubas. And there, Amalu Rab Chia bar Ami Tanina Ishte Arusa. So really, the discussion was about a halacha that Reb Chia Bar Ami brought up. While Oysa Dover Husker, that's what the story is about. Now, another thing that was discussed at the time was our halacha, but that wasn't why the Gemara said v'yosef Reb Chia Bar Ami Gabayu. So Tosfos is saying our Gemara is really referencing that story, and our Gemara is bringing up another issue that came up. But in fact, the issue that came up would not have warranted the v'yosef Reb Chia Bar Ami Gabayu, because that would have been the Gabi the halacha that Reb Chia Bar Ami said. So it's just interesting, the story. This is really just a sidebar story that was going on while Reb Chia Bar Ami was actually bringing a halacha to them that was discussed over there. So let's have a look. Who is the vendor over here? So Zok to Gemara, Lishbar b'aynesach l'shaber chaves v'lishbar chesayayim. Mao she is chor mutter. Mi amrin, and do you say Kivan the Yisrael right to be human shal chaviyos elu? The Yisrael is doing the breaking, wants those chaviyos to survive, because if they don't survive until he breaks them, he lost his job. So he doesn't want them to break. Achi Yishaber move until he breaks them. V'yidel schorim also. So I don't understand why this has to be speaking by the owner being a guy. Why can't the owner have been a yid? If the owner was a guy, he wouldn't be breaking them at all. If the owner's a guy, he'd keep them. Why? If the owner's a guy, he'll say, "What's it your business? What I do with my inesa?" I'm not sure. I'm not sure why it had to be that the owner's a guy. Let's look again. I don't see anywhere it says it, but you obviously quoted from somewhere. So let's have a look. So let's try this again. Sachar lishbar b'aynesach mau. Mi amrin kiva the right to be human also. Oidilma kol l'mute tifla shaperdom. Any opportunity that's destroying Avoda Zara, you're allowed to do, and there wouldn't be usher. So technically, there should be an isser, because I'm having a noah. The employee breaking these barrels, I'm having a noah from the kiyum of these barrels, because he wants them to survive so we can break them. Yet could be we don't answer. This is only the Rabban. It's not Mamish and Israel. No, we would only answer him. Maybe we wouldn't, because we don't want to inhibit. We don't want to get in the way of the tifla to be smashed. So that was the shayla. So Amar Nachman said, no problem. Yishbar, let him break him the tovale of bracha, and he can get paid. There's no isser. There's no concern whatsoever. Okay, so let's see the Gemara weiter. Maybe it'll come apparent later. Okay, so let's see if we can bring a ride to Rav Nachman. In fact, that there's no concern of breaking the barrel, because we don't want to hinder these barrels being broken. It says ein oidrim ima oivdik gechavim b'klayim. The halacha is klayim is osher b'no. You're not allowed to work for a goyish farm in a case when you're fostering klaya kerem. Now that's what Rashi says. Tosfos says it's not klaya kerem, it's klaya zroim for other reasons. But if the produce that he's hiring you to dig and to help the growth of the product is klayim, you're not allowed to do that with a guy. Avol, you know what you are allowed to do? Oikrin imoy, if the guy is hiring you to destroy the klayim and throw them out, so then you are allowed to do it. Zokt Rashi, the Afagav the right to be human. He's hoping that they won't die on their own, because I want my job, so I can make money on it. Why? To eliminate what's bad. So that supports Rab Nachman's svara that we'll let you destroy the yain nesach because we want to minimize tifla. Zakmar svarua, it was thought that a Hamani Rabbi Kiva, that this price is going to come to Rabbi Kiva. And then we have a beautiful riot, because right now that there's klayim there, there's no isser being done. It was also to plant the klayim, right? But once it's planted, is there an isser? So if there's no isser, then there's no problem of being mamayit as a tifla. Zok to Gemara, we're assuming you're going according to Rabbi Kiva. The Amar Makayim the Klaim like it. Rabbi Kiva holds that if there's Klaim already planted and you help its growth, you'll get malchus. So Rabbi Kiva holds not only is it also to plant Klaim, it's also to enhance its growth. So therefore, the Tanya, If you do any type of work on pre-existing client to help it grow better, like it, you get malchus for that as well. I'm sorry. Is actually Rashi's chipa offer len kader kolazorim like it because that's called zoreya. But Rabbi Kiva said even more afamakayim. Even if you're not doing something that's counted as zoreya, you're just fertilizing it. You're doing something that's only inhibiting its growth, but it's not called planting. It would also be asur gin malchus. My timer, the Rabbi Kiva. Where does Rabbi Kiva get it from? Because it says sadach aloi sizra klayim. You're not allowed to do anything that's called planting, but being mekayim it, there it doesn't say the Torah that's asur. The Torah says he knows it from sadach aloi sizra klayim. I only know if you plant. Mekayim inayin tamadomer loy klayim. So we have to look at the pasuk inside. It says in the pasuk, "Eschulkoise tishmaru behemtecha loy sarbia klayim kama sadcha loy sizra klayim." Zok Rabbi Kiva, don't put that comma there. What you should do is you should use the word from behemtecha loy sarbia klayim and connect it to the next. Klayim sadcha loy. So that klayim is read two ways. Sai behemtecha loy sarbia klayim, and sai is read klayim sadcha loy. Meaning, not only is there an isser loy sizra klayim, but there's also an isser of klayim sadcha loy. There should never be klayim in your property, period, even if you're not planting it. That's how Rabbi Kiva knows that there's an isser deraisa and you get malchus for being mekayim klayim. So Rabbi Kiva Omer Ava mekayim. My time is Rabbi Kiva Amakra sadcha loy. Sadcha loy isser klayim. Ainli l'zareh mekayim inayin. Tamad loy klayim, which is what I just said. Klayim sadcha loy. The ilu lemitu tifla. Sorry, yet it would still be mutter to do it, to work on it, if you're destroying the climb. So that would be allowed. So you have a raya from here that even Rabbi Kiva, who said that working on an existing plant would be asur, this is going to be mutter. From the Rabbanon, you might not have a raya, because from the Rabbanon, there's no isser anyway in working on an existing plant. It's only Rabbi Kiva who says it's asur to work on an existing plant, yet the Brasha still says that lemuta tiflo shari. So we have our raya. Zakmarlo, you don't have a raya, because maybe Hamani Rabbanani, maybe this brisa that says that you're allowed to work and you're allowed to be oiker imoy is going according to the Rabbanon, where there's no isser to be mekayim kloim. Frankly, my Rabbanon, my your oiker. If you look kiyumi nami shaperdami. According to the Rabbanon, it's not only destroying the climb that I'm allowed to do, I'm allowed to do any work on the field with existing climb. So going to we're talking about a whole new problem. You know what the problem that might be there is if he's working for free for a goy. You're not allowed to work for free for a goy because you're not allowed to give them a matas chinam. Rabbi Yehuda Hida Amar litain lahem matas chinam otzer. So therefore, maybe we're going according to Rabbi Yehuda, who holds you not allowed to give for them a matnas chinam, but lemutas hatifla would be allowed. But who said if you're having a benefit from an isser hana, who said then it would be allowed lemutas hatifla? So therefore, we don't have a raya. Zakimar, we still have a raya because Mida Rabbi Yehuda Nishmal Rabbi Kiva. The same way Rabbi Yehuda suspends an otherwise prohibited action of helping a goy because of lemutas hatifla. So by the same token, Rabbi Kiva would suspend the isser to work with klayim lemutas hatifla. So Lav Amar Rabbi Yehuda also litin lematas chinam. Aval lemutas hatifla shaberdami, meaning the Rabbanon will relax an isser if it's for the greater good to destroy tifla. So therefore, we can deduce the same thing. Rabbi Kiva nami aval gavdam Rabbi Kiva makayim makayim loika lemute tifla shaperdami v'sulei midi. There's nothing to talk about over here. We have a good raya from this brisa that you would be allowed to take pay to destroy barrels of the ayin nesach, because even though there might have been no reason for the Rabbanon to ask you to do that, but since the greater good is occurring, we're destroying the barrels of Isra Hana, that's going to be allowed. Okay, let's stop here. We'll